Carl's ex-wife and his chronic pain. Carl was a 54-year-old engineer with 2 children in their 20s, an ailing father, and an unhappy marriage. I never met Carl's wife, but I did witness the tale of 2 men reflected through both his body and his general outlook on life in the year leading up to his divorce and the year following it. Carl was a simple man with good intentions and strong values, but a very limited relationship with his own emotions. He came in for physiotherapy with an anatomical fixation of what hurt in his body and a restricted perception of what he could do physically because of his pains. He had an odd personality. It may have been his attempts to mask deep feelings of being unsettled with how little he knew about anatomy and his engineering bias towards the structural. Either way, Carl always seemed to be some level of uncomfortable. Carl's sacroiliac or SI joints in the back of his pelvis and the upper trapezius muscle in his neck and shoulders were a barometer of the stress he was going through in his home life. He didn't talk much about his personal life for the first 2 years I knew him, because he internalized all his stress and turned it into a fixation on the sensations he felt in his body. He progressively did less of what he enjoyed and exuded fear his body was breaking on him. He loved to ski, hike, and play music, but worried that his SI joint couldn't handle it, so he didn't. Carl discovered that IMS gave him some lasting relief from his pain, but he had a hard time connecting the dots as to why it kept regenerating. I talked to him about the role stress plays in the body, about emotional holding patterns, and encouraged him to do more than he thought he was physically capable of. He listened to me but didn't hear what I was saying until he found himself on the other side of his father passing away, divorcing his wife, and moving out of the house. Carl came into physio wearing the same khaki pants, blue button-up shirt, and running shoes for over 2 years. He always had the same basic alignment and physical strength under his clothes, but a new set of stresses locked into his body that manifested as bracing tension in his butt, chest, and shoulders. I progressively learned from Carl. I helped him while he was locked into survival mode for the first year, and it wasn't until some of his life stressors calmed down that he had the mental wheelhouse to view his life more objectively and make better decisions. My lessons about how stress affected his body fell on deaf ears while he dealt with his father's estate, worked full-time, and was not getting along with his wife and kids. His immediate need for me was to make his body feel better until he was ready to address the role of his mind. Once Carl got some closure on the death of his father, he started the process of separating from his wife and started talking more about his personal life in his physio sessions. His stubborn SI joint and sore neck were still an underlying theme, but he progressively saw the connection between how many times per month he needed physio and his general happiness in life. He wasn't happy at home and allowed his discontent to fester into his own physical destruction. I must believe his problems were not his wife's fault, but the product of a failed relationship and likely his deep-seated issues with his parents. All I can say is that he managed to get through his journey by treating his stress physically when he needed to, and then shifted to addressing the bigger issues when he had the capacity. I witnessed him start skiing again, playing guitar, exercising, and seeing me once every few months instead of once per week. Through Carl's journey with his pain, he saw multiple doctors, had an X-ray, an MRI, and blood tests to no avail. He was resistant to seeing a counselor because his perceived need was physical, so I had to fill both the physical and therapy aspects of my job. Helping him was a balance of understanding his needs and providing treatment I knew was a short-term solution until he was ready to see the bigger picture. Once he started to sort out his personal life and made himself a priority, I could see and feel his whole body start to relax. Carl moved into his own place and found a girlfriend with common interests which directly correlated to his perceived pain levels and his trips to the physio clinic dropping significantly. I helped him with his pain and helped him understand his body until he had the capacity to help himself. Life tends to get in the way of good intentions and causes various levels of insidious stress on our bodies and our minds. Our bodies try their best to send us signals to tell us when they are not happy, but most of us don't understand what the messages mean and either ignore them or unnecessarily worry about them. Carl's body was holding on to the stress his brain couldn't process. He actively searched for answers to his discomfort that the medical system was more than happy to ignorantly offer him. But as is commonly the case, he didn't need a diagnosis. He needed an explanation and some support during a stressful period in his life. For our society to function more cohesively, we need to start teaching our children how their bodies and minds work, start supporting our parents, and start educating the public that doctors aren't always the best option to support their physical and emotional needs.